If your nonprofit is living grant to grant, you are on shaky ground. I don't know how else to say that. So let me just show you how to actually find and convert donors into long term supporters. So, first, I am Sharmon Lebby. I am a nonprofit consultant. I work with organizations helping them to build solid foundations in branding, communications, strategic planning, and collaboration strategies. And so when that comes to fundraising and donor strategies, it is really about building communication and building relationships with organizations. Because I think a lot of organizations think they have like a donor problem and their donors aren't necessarily engaged or they can't find the right donors. And I don't think that this is necessarily a donor problem specifically, but it's really like a journey problem, right? And so I want to really break down today like how we're going to find our donors, how we're going to guide them through a journey and really turn them into steady supporters. So let's do that. So, first, I don't want you to think that I am like downing grants. Grants are great, they're extremely helpful. And when you can get them and get them consistently and get them long term and get them like unrestricted so that they help you with operations as well, they're fantastic. And the grant landscape is changing in a lot of ways. Founders and not found foundations are doing a much better job of helping nonprofits like in a more holistic manner, and I'm really really grateful for that. But at the same time, being grant dependent looks like unstable funding, right? It's limited flexibility a lot of times, and it's a really really competitive process. And especially in this day and age in 2025, like grants are just kind of disappearing. Funding from the federal government is going away. Stuff is drying up, and there's still more nonprofits coming into that landscape like every day, right? So everybody's starting organizations. Nobody's really thinking strategically about them. And we are getting a lot of competition for grants. And it's more so now because more people are needing these services from nonprofits, and then there's less money to support them. And so being grant dependent is not the most ideal way to run your nonprofit, which is why I really think that building a base of donors is key. And I think we just need to remember and think that donors just don't fall into your lap, right? They go on this journey and we need to take in there. That is our responsibility as nonprofit founders within this space. So let's talk about that, right? Like, what if that donor journey was an actual journey? What does that look like? I think there are 4 stages that donors go through. And that's number one is just awareness. This is when they're first hearing about your cause. This is when that light bulb is going on, and whether it's like word of mouth or it's at an event or they see you in an ad, right? This is when they're first becoming aware of your organization. They're like, oh, who is that? What is that, right? We're just getting them aware. Stage 2 is curiosity. So that's when they're like really starting to engage with you and your organization. You're coming to your site, right? They're starting to follow you on social media. They're wanting to know more, right? They're hooked in and they're wanting to learn a little bit more. But after they go through that curiosity, then we're in a belief stage. This is when they're really starting to feel connected. They're really feeling aligned with your organization. This is coming through your storytelling, your proof of impact, you putting out your values, right? They're like, oh, we in this journey together. We're here, we're besties now. And then after that, this is when they're taking action, right? So this is when they're giving. This is when they're volunteering. This is when they're engaging more with your posts. This is when they're sharing stuff and advocating like without you asking for them, right? They're starting to tell people about you. They're like, have you heard of this great amazing organization that does this when something comes up? Because now they're like fully invested in what you're doing. And I think the mistake that a lot of nonprofits make is that we start talking to everybody like they're already in that belief stage or they're already in that action stage. And they're not, right? If they're just hearing about you for the first time, they're nowhere near that. That relationship has not been built at. And so we have to make sure that we are taking our donors through this entire journey. So let's then talk about like how we are actually finding donors at each of these stages. So I think in the awareness stage is when we're hitting them up on social media or at local events or different PR, different marketing that we've done, or even partnerships, right? I love a good collaboration. It is like my favorite word. But we're getting introduced, or they're getting introduced to us and our organizations through these different partnerships, through these different collaborations that we have. And then in curiosity, these are the people that are like opting into our emails. They're starting to follow us on social media, right? They're getting small event invites. Don't be afraid to invite people to your different things that are coming in. My mom runs an organization, and every time she meets people and people are starting to learn about the nonprofit that she has, she's always like, come on by, just like stop in. We serve lunch every day. Just come see what we're about. We'll give you a tour, kind of thing. She's not asking them for money. She just telling them to come and get some free lunch, right? And you can give out free resources as well, just sharing different things that you are doing, helping to build up that curiosity stage once they've kind of already hooked in and started asking you for more. And then as we're moving into that belief stage, this is happening again through that consistent storytelling. This is happening in our impact reports. This is probably stuff that we're putting in our newsletters, even on social media. And then as well as just telling testimonials, right? Telling people like who you are, what you're about, letting the community that you serve talk more about your impact in their lives. And this is really starting to build and nurture that belief stage. And then there's action, right? And when we're wanting them to take action, we need to tell them to take action. And we need to be really clear and specific about the type of action that we want them to take. I am guilty of this as well. Sometimes I'm just like in my storytelling mode and I'm telling stories and I forget to tell people to do something. Like, what is it that I want them to do? Like, even on social media, do you want them to like? Do you want them to comment? Do you want them to share this post? Like, be clear, be specific. Like, give them really, really simple like donation ask, like, hey, we could use some plastic bags. Could you bring in some plastic bags? Like really simple things, right? We could use like $5 to help us get through like the next 2 days. Really, really, really simple. Or like 10 people to give $5 kind of things. Hey, we need recurring donors, like, set up a monthly donation thing. Give really easy options for them to take action with you. I think it's also really, really important to, again, remember that different people are meeting you at different points. And so you don't want to skip like the early steps. And that's not to say that you need to have like posts or newsletters that go through like all of these steps. Like, you can pick a newsletter that is made for like a very specific audience, and you just talk to those specific people, and that's it. You don't necessarily have to do all those steps at one time, but you just need to keep them in mind, that you need to make sure that when you're starting to ask donors that you are keeping all of these steps in mind, and that you're covering the whole journey. You're covering all those early steps, no matter how we're communicating with our donors. And then let's think about really converting those donors into like long-term supporters, right? Because if you don't know, like 70% of donors like give one time and then you never see them again. So we don't want that, right? We want to make sure that it's not just like a first time donation, or it's just not the only donation. We are really nurturing them and inviting them into the fold. So I think like the most practical thing is just like saying thank you, right? And not just a generic thank you. Like, I know an organization that used to write out thank you cards after their huge, actually, I know a couple of them that would write thank you cards after like huge donation campaigns. Everybody who gave got a handwritten thank you card just to say thank you. And it wasn't generic, it had their name on it. It was handwritten, and it just helps you to build that relationship and build that trust, right? You want to share stories regularly of your impact. I'm just jumping from one thing to another, but other tips is to share your impact regularly. Let people know what you're doing. Let people understand that you are doing what you say you're doing, that your mission is working, that you are on that road to your vision, and that you are actually doing something with their donations, whether they're donating clothes or donating shoes or donating money. You want them to know that they are actually serving a purpose and helping, right? Then you want to invite them to like get deeper involved as well. Um, Invite them to donate, invite them to build their own like peer-to-peer campaigns, invite them to volunteer, to be an ambassador for your organization, just different ways. I think recurring donor programs are also really good, just keeping it really, really easy for them to stay connected, to keep going, instead of donating like $1,000, like, hey, what if you donated like $100 a month instead, kind of thing, right? And we're just constantly giving, right? But the whole point is to really just like build trust and not just transactions, right? This keeps people giving when they feel connected to you, when you're building a relationship with them, when you are inviting them into the fold, when they feel like they're part of the story and part of the journey and part of this organization, and they're not just another check to you. This is when they're going to really dive in deep and really be a part of what you're doing. So let's talk about some common mistakes, right? One, again, is just being too vague. Just saying support is, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? You want to be very specific. Tell them, hey, we need 12 pairs of shoes. We need 5 plastic bags. We need some toilet paper for the bathroom. Like, be really, really specific about what it is that you're asking of them and what it is that you need for them to do. The other thing is just speaking too soon, right? You don't want to ask for donations before you have built that trust. This is, again, we're taking them on that whole journey. So making sure you're going through that whole journey with them before you're asking for their money or you're asking them to donate or asking for them to do something. The other thing is you treating everybody like they're the same, like just constantly putting out the same stuff for the same people all the time. You really need to like segment your audiences and really think and remember like, hey, we've got some newbies over here and we need to treat them a little differently than the people that have been with us for 5 years. And the other thing, of course, is just that ignoring that follow-up. You want to follow up with your donors, right? We want to bring them into the fold. We want them to understand that they're part of the family, that they're part of this journey, that they are part of this story. Because if you treat them like one-time donors, they are going to be one-time donors. And that's not what we want ultimately, right? We want to really build that relationship and reach out to them and making sure that they understand that they are appreciated and that they're known. And it may seem counterintuitive to like be focused on your donors, but a lot of times your donors become volunteers when you build this relationship with them. Or a lot of time, people in the community that you have built relationships with, like in the community that you serve, then become donors and become volunteers. Because they understand the impact that you have and they've felt like they're part of this family and they felt like they're part of this story. And so ultimately, that's what I want to leave you with. I want you to understand that finding donors isn't really about luck. It's just about building this really, really clear journey from awareness to action. Like we're taking them through this phase and we're building this trust and we're building relationships and we're building a family and we're building a community, right? It's all about your relationships. Even when we're thinking about grants, I feel like I might have said this already. If I didn't, or if I did, you're going to hear it again. But even when we're like going out for grants, the one thing they always tell you is to try to build relationships with people, build relationships with the funders in order to just have a better chance of getting and receiving that grant, because when you give it for the first time, that's the first time they're basically in that awareness stage, and they may not be ready to give you the grant because they don't fully trust you. They don't have that relationship with you. Can you get grants on the first time out? Yes, you can. But when it comes to like the bigger and the larger ones and the real like organizational sustaining type of grants and funding, that takes building some kind of relationship very often. And so it's the same way. And so basically, I just helped you get some grants too. But this is how we're going to get our donors, keep our donors, and really build some long lasting support. So, if you want to build intentional donor journeys that actually convert, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that little notification button, hit the bell. And then also just drop me a comment if you want me to cover some donor retention strategies more in detail, if you guys want some more examples, or if there's just something else you want to hear about regarding nonprofits in general. Go ahead, drop your questions, drop your comments in the comments. I was like, in the chat. There's no chat. But I will catch you guys next time, and keep building with intention.